Hi everyone. Before we get into this audiobook, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button and drop a like. It helps me out a lot, as well as contributes a lot to the channel. Now, let's get into the story. I hope you enjoy. Ilara's boots sank slightly into the loam of the forest floor, releasing a fragrance of pine needles and damp earth. Her movements were fluid, honed by years spent navigating the wilderness. Each snapping twig, each flurry of leaves, the raucous cry of a distant raven, these were clues in a constant survival game. Her immediate need was simple: secure enough sustenance for the coming week. Beside a game trail, worn smooth by countless hooves, she carefully set a snare, fashioned from woven vines and slender wire. Her fingers, calloused yet nimble, worked with the speed of long practice. "Be patient, little trap," she breathed, as if imbuing it with life. "Tonight, you might just catch a song." Survival wasn't merely a skill. It was a constant parley with the wild, a delicate balance of respect and self-preservation. She understood its language, its shifts and seasons, and she took only what she required, a stark contrast to the avarice of the pack wolves, who saw the land as their birthright, seizing what they desired with tooth and claw. A shiver traced a path down her spine, a ghostly reminder of a night she fought to suppress. The memory surged forth, a punishing wave of sorrow and terror. A mere child, she'd been too young to fully grasp the adult world, yet old enough to know her mother's warm embrace and her father's steadying hand. They had chosen a life bordering pack territory, trading security for autonomy. Their existence was simple, fulfilling, until the night the howls arrived. These weren't the familiar, communicative calls echoing across the expanse. This was a savage, blood-hungry chorus that shattered the forest's tranquility. She pictured herself ripped from sleep, the coarse fabric of her nightdress scraping her skin, as her father pulled her towards the hidden cellar. Her mother's scream, abruptly silenced, amplified Ilara's terror, turning her limbs to ice. "Stay here, Ilara," her father had ordered, his voice strained, his eyes blazing with resolve. "No matter what, don't emerge." The cellar was a black abyss, the air thick with the scent of soil and decay. She huddled, hands clamped over her ears, desperately attempting to shut out the slaughter unfolding above. The shuddering of glass, the rending of wood, the feral snarls of the aggressors, each sound a hammer blow against her sanity. The coppery tang of blood, heavy and cloying, permeated the cellar from above. Then silence fell, a silence more profound, more terrifying than the preceding chaos. How long she remained paralyzed, she couldn't say, but eventually, gnawing hunger and thirst compelled her to action. She crept up the stairs, each creaking step an echoing gunshot in the suffocating quiet. The scene that greeted her was seared forever into her mind. Her home, once a haven, was now a charnel ground. Furniture lay scattered, walls painted crimson, the air thick with the reek of death. She found her mother first, lying broken and still near the hearth, eyes wide with frozen horror. Her father was outside, near the woodpile, his body defiled beyond recognition. The specter of her parents haunted her every waking moment. She had narrowly escaped into the sheltering undergrowth, the wolves' faces branded onto her soul. This memory was a constant sentinel, whispering warnings in the dark, fueling her relentless need to survive. The attackers belonged to the Crimson Moon Pack, notorious for their brutality and insatiable territorial greed. They targeted her family for their refusal to submit to their dominance. Ilara shook her head, fighting back the darkness threatening to consume her. She needed to stay grounded, focused on the present. She rechecked the snare's tension, ensuring it was perfectly balanced. Then, she pressed onward, further into the woods, placing more snares with the same meticulous care. She was aware of the dangers she courted, venturing so near pack territory. But choice was a thing of the past. Survival was the only imperative. As the sun began its descent, painting the forest in long shadows, Ilara began her trek toward home. Her sanctuary was a small, concealed cabin, secreted away in a secluded clearing, far from the beaten path. She had built it single-handedly, using reclaimed materials and sheer grit. It was a refuge, a place where she could finally draw breath. The cabin was austere, yet sufficient. A single room containing a fireplace, a bed of pine boughs, and a simple table. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with dried herbs, smoked meats, and other provisions. Outside, she cultivated a small garden of vegetables and medicinal plants. Self-sufficiency had become her creed, reliance on others, an unaffordable luxury. She pushed open the door, its hinges groaning in protest, and entered. The air was still and cool, carrying a whisper of wood smoke and dried lavender. She kindled a fire in the hearth, the flames snapping and crackling as they took hold. Light danced across the crude walls, banishing the shadows and enveloping the space in a warm glow. She sat at the table, retrieving a piece of dried venison and a handful of berries. As she ate, she listened to the orchestra of the forest, an owl's soft hoot, the murmur of leaves, the distant lament of a wolf. These sounds were constant reminders of lurking danger, yet also provided a source of comfort. She belonged to this world, connected in a way few could comprehend. Ilara knew she couldn't remain hidden forever. Eventually, the past would resurface. But until that day, she would continue to live life on her own terms. A lone wolf silhouetted against the moon. The fragrance of wood smoke intermingled with the rich, earthy scent of the forest, creating a familiar and soothing atmosphere. Ilara reclined in her worn wooden chair, her gaze fixed on the dancing flames of the fire. The firelight played across the rough-hewn walls of her small cabin, casting long, shifting shadows that mimicked the restless spirits dwelling within the woods. She was alone, as always, but on this night, the solitude pressed down with unusual weight. The whispers of the wild seemed to carry a note of warning, a premonition of impending change. The future loomed undefined, yet she sensed that her life stood on the precipice, about to be irreversibly upended by forces far beyond her dominion. The moon, a gleaming disk in the ebony vault, painted the forest floor with elongated, spectral shapes. Ilara, a shadow herself, moved with preternatural grace, her senses a taut web vibrating with the night's subtle music. Tonight's prize: venison, sustenance, rawhide, vital marrow. Survival was a ceaseless vigil, a grueling endeavor. Then, a prickling awareness. Not a sound, not a scent, but a visual disturbance. A phantom shift in the gloom where stillness should have reigned. He tracked the same quarry, his silhouette a study in restrained might sinews bunching beneath weathered leather. A renegade. The raw, feral tang confirmed it. A solitary predator, like her. Instinctively, Ilara's hand drifted towards the bone knife lashed to her thigh, her pulse a frantic tattoo against her ribs. Another complication. Another unknown quantity in her meticulously maintained solitude. She possessed the skill to defeat him, honed by years of hardship and fueled by simmering grief. Yet, the prospect of yet another conflict, another extinguished life, left an acrid taste. He halted, head tilted, registering her presence. eyes the color of a brewing squall locked onto hers across the moon-drenched clearing. Not aggression, but a guarded calculation. A large man, powerfully built, etched with the chronicles of past encounters. The deer, blissfully unaware of the silent drama, continued its meal. Ilara subtly relaxed her grip, a minute concession. He mirrored her, the tautness in his shoulders easing imperceptibly. They stood in a wordless contest, two hunters vying for the same sustenance. Finally, a voice, a low, resonant growl that seemed to emanate from the very earth itself. "The kill is yours, if you desire it." Ilara paused. "An offering? From a wolf, alone?" Skepticism wrestled with pragmatism. She desperately needed the meat. "Why?" she breathed, her voice a mere filament of sound. He offered a shrug, a dismissive gesture that belied the intensity burning within his eyes. "I've fed. You haven't." A falsehood, or at least a carefully curated truth. He had been following the deer's trail. Perhaps he simply craved peace as much as she did. "We share," she countered, wagering on a tenuous accord. He nodded, a brusque, almost reluctant agreement. Together, they brought the deer down in swift, decisive action. Their movements flowed together with practiced ease, a wordless ballet driven by necessity. A small fire was kindled, its flames devouring the tinder and casting dancing shadows upon their faces. The savory perfume of roasting flesh permeated the frigid air, a primal comfort. They ate in silence, tearing at the meat with fierce hunger, their gazes constantly sweeping the surrounding woods. At length, Ilara broke the stillness. "Kale," he offered, answering the unspoken inquiry in her daze. "Kale Shadowclaw." "Ilara Meadowsweet," she responded, the name feeling strangely alien after years of isolation. He scrutinized her features, his scrutiny unnerving. Meadowsweet, a name unheard in many seasons. A ripple of apprehension coursed through her. "It's not common." "No," he affirmed, his voice hushed. "It is not." He hesitated, then inquired, "The Crimson Moon Pack they passed through this region years ago. Debay?" Ilara recoiled inwardly, the past surging back in a painful rush. "The inferno, the cries, the crimson tide they did," she managed, her voice constricted with anguish. "They murdered my parents." His features softened, a glint of compassion flickering in his stormy eyes. "My condolences." She averted her gaze, unable to meet his. "Condolences offer no resurrection." Silence descended, broken only by the crackling fire and the distant lament of an owl. Then Kale spoke again, his tone gentle. "Why are you here? Alone?" Ilara hesitated, wary of exposing herself, but something in his gaze, a shared language of loss, compelled her to respond. "Nowhere else calls to me." "My sentiments precisely," he replied, a thread of bitterness woven into his voice. "The pack's rogues are unwelcome within their ranks." "I am aware," Ilara acknowledged, recalling Ronan's proposition a gilded cage masquerading as refuge. "I favor autonomy." "Autonomy demands its cost," Kale observed, his gaze focused on the dancing flames. "One I am prepared to bear," Ilara asserted, her voice unwavering. They lingered in companionable quietude, two isolated souls finding solace in shared presence. The moon ascended in the heavens, saturating the forest in its pearly radiance. "Why the offer of the deer?" Ilara inquired, disrupting the silence. Kale shrugged. "Perhaps weariness of solitary hunts. Perhaps recognition." A kindred spirit. Ilara studied him anew, truly seeing him for the first time. Beneath the hardened exterior, the scars, the haunted depths of his eyes, she perceived something more. A spark of warmth, a glimmer of vulnerability, a connection. He captured her gaze, holding it with unwavering intensity. A silent acknowledgement passed between them. A shared understanding of past wounds and a nascent glimmer of something beyond. The air vibrated with an unspoken tension, a magnetic force drawing them closer. Ilara felt a warmth unfurling within her, a sensation dormant for years, a whisper of belonging. But then, a faraway howl shattered the fragile tranquility, a mournful cry that echoed through the trees. Kale tensed, his features hardening. "Crimson Moon," he growled. "They are near." Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs. They were closing in. Her past had found her, the illusion of safety, the dawning connection with Kale about to be shattered. "We must move," she urged, her voice laced with urgency. Kale nodded, his expression grim. "Together?" Ilara hesitated. Together? Was she ready to entrust herself to another? To depend on someone else? The price of freedom, could it be shared? The howl reverberated again, closer this time. The decision was wrenched from her mirror. Grasp. "Together," she whispered, her voice barely audible. They extinguished the flames, obliterating all traces of their brief respite. Then they vanished into the depths of the forest, two solitary wolves fleeing a common history, hurtling towards an unknown destiny. The days blurred, each dawn splashing the forest canopy with vibrant hues as Ilara and Kale built a life from shared hardship and burgeoning trust. They ventured deeper into the ancient woods, following time-worn game trails until they discovered a secluded hollow, guarded by towering pines and nestled beneath a craggy, verdant cliff. "This place," Kale murmured, his voice a comforting rumble against Ilara's skin as he breathed in her scent, a primal claim. "We can make a sanctuary here." Ilara agreed silently, her gaze assessing the natural defenses the dell afforded. The cliff would buffer them against icy northern gales, while dense thickets would mask their presence from prying eyes. This was more than a mere refuge. It was a place to tentatively send down roots. They labored with tireless devotion, driven by an unspoken pact. Kale, leveraging his brute strength, wrestled fallen timber and hefty boughs, while Ilara, agile and quick, wove them together with supple vines and springy saplings. Their movements flowed together, a fluid collaboration born of necessity and kindled by growing affection. Slowly, the shelter emerged, a rough-hewn lean to press against the cliff face, its entrance veiled by a curtain of cascading ivy. One evening, nestled within their rough dwelling, the fire's cheerful crackle pushing back the encroaching darkness, Ilara found herself drawn into Kale's magnetic gaze. His quail eyes, usually shuttered and wary, now held a startling warmth that mirrored the feelings stirring within her. Why such animosity towards Pax? She ventured, the question lingering like wood smoke. Kale's jaw tightened, a shadow of anguish clouding his features. He lost himself in the flames, seeking solace in their hypnotic dance. "They stole everything," he rasped, his voice barely audible. "My kin, my home, my liberty." He unfurled a tale of treachery and bloodshed, of a merciless alpha who coveted his father's territory and orchestrated their ruin. He chronicled a life lived in flight, haunted by specters of the past, perpetually looking over his shoulder, fearing trust. Ilara listened, her heart constricting with empathy. She grasped his pain, his skepticism, his desperate need for self-reliance. She, too, harbored a simmering resentment towards those who sought to exert control. "I understand," she whispered, her hand reaching for his. "The crimson moon took my family as well." Cale's fingers tightened around hers, his intense gaze sending a tremor through her. "I know," he breathed. "I know what they did. That's why I couldn't abandon you." The air thrummed with unspoken emotions. With shared sorrow and the delicate promise of hope, Ilara edged closer, drawn to Cale like iron to a lodestone. She recognized in him a kindred spirit, a fellow survivor intimately acquainted with the darkness residing within her own soul. "What of you?" Cale asked, severing the spell. "Why did you forsake your pack?" Ilara hesitated, the memories of her youth surging back, sharp and painful. She recounted tales of her parents, their unwavering devotion and their fierce commitment to protecting their own. She described the pack's unyielding rules and its stifling atmosphere, her growing thirst for independence, and her ultimate resolution to sever ties. "I was suffocating," she confessed, her voice quivering. "I couldn't abide such a life, constrained by dictates and expectations. Yearned for autonomy, to chart my own course, to carve out my own fate." Cale nodded, profound understanding reflected in his eyes. "Liberty demands a price," he said, a melancholic undercurrent in his tone. "But it's a price worth paying." As the days deepened into weeks, Ilara and Cale's connection strengthened. They hunted as one, their senses attuned, their thoughts intertwined. They traded stories and shared laughter, confided secrets and whispered dreams. They discovered comfort in each other's company, a sanctuary from the brutal realities of their existence. One night, bathed in the moon's ethereal glow, as they lay entwined, Ilara realized she was succumbing to love. It wasn't a conscious choice, but a gradual, irresistible capitulation to the forces uniting them. "Cale, she breathed, her voice a mere sigh against his skin. "Ye," he hushed her with a tender kiss, his lips gentle and reassuring. "I know," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "I feel it too." The kiss intensified, a fervent expression of their intertwined desires, their unvoiced needs, their blossoming love. Ilara embraced Cale, holding him close, her body trembling with a blend of trepidation and exhilaration. "I never imagined I could feel this way again," she confessed, pulling back slightly to meet his gaze. "Not after what transpired with my parents, you Cale," cradled her face, his thumb stroking her cheekbones. "I know," he soothed. "But you're not alone any longer, Ilara. I'm here. I will always be here." He kissed her again, a slow, lingering caress that cemented their destinies, binding them in a clandestine union. Fueled by ardor and threatened by the ever-present peril lurking just beyond the firelight, they were two outcasts, alienated from society, compelled to fend for themselves. Yet together, they were stronger, more resilient, and more determined than ever to safeguard the delicate bloom of love they had found flourishing in the heart of the wild. Elpha's scent Ronin ironwood navigated the timberland with a predator's natural elegance. Sunlight filtered through the high branches, scattering luminous shapes across his powerful frame as he led his cadre. 6 fighters, each hardened by countless clashes, matched his pace, their movements mirroring his own. As Alpha of the Crescent Moon Pack, the territory's largest and most formidable, his authority was palpable in every gesture. An unspoken command hung in the air. The day's foray was standard, a circuit of their holdings to deter intruders. Yet, a restless Energy pulsed within Ronan. A subtle disquiet. The latest reports of increased rogue activity had him on edge. "Extend the sweep," he rumbled, his deep voice resonating through the trees. "Scour every corner." Silent nods were the response, his warriors dispersing to broaden their coverage. Ronan pressed onward, his senses amplified, attuned to each rustle and snap. He drew a deep breath, the familiar redolence of pine and earth filling his lungs. This land was his heritage, his dominion, every inch etched in his memory, or so he believed. Then, an unfamiliar aroma pierced the known scents of the woods. A delicate sweetness, interwoven with raw, untamed energy that sparked a visceral reaction. Unlike any he'd encountered, it was both captivating and intoxicating. Ronan halted abruptly, head tilted, nostrils testing the air. He inhaled again, seeking to isolate the source of this alluring essence. The fragrance tugged at a deep, unfathomed instinct, primal, insistent, undeniable. Lyra Nightshade, his second, registered his stillness and approached cautiously. Her keen amber eyes swept the surrounding trees. "Alpha? Something amiss?" Ronan raised a hand for silence. He closed his eyes, focusing solely on the elusive scent. It emanated from the west, deeper within the forest, toward the unmarked boundary. He opened his eyes, his gaze hardening. With resolve. "An alien scent," he stated, his voice tight with contained force. "Something new." Lyra frowned, suspicion clouding her features. A rogue, perhaps? Or worse, trespassers from the Shadowfang? "Neither," Ronan replied, shaking his head. "This is different." He couldn't explain it, but he felt certain this was no ordinary intrusion. This scent hinted at something singular, something significant. He turned to Lyra, his eyes blazing. "Investigate. Discretion paramount. Locate the source, but avoid confrontation unless unavoidable. I want to know who or what is responsible." Lyra stiffened inwardly at the order. As his most trusted advisor, his confidant, the hint of possessiveness in his tone grated. She had long assumed she would be his Luna, his chosen mate. Yet the manner in which he spoke of this strange scent ignited a cold apprehension within her. Still, she veiled her displeasure with a practiced smile. "Of course, Alpha," she replied smoothly. "I'll take point." Answers by nightfall. Ronan gave a curt nod, his attention already drawn westward. The scent intensified, beckoning him like a moth to a flickering flame. He clenched his fists, resisting the impulse to abandon his responsibilities and race toward its origin. He was Alpha, bound by duty to his pack. Yet, a primal urgency demanded he claim what was his. "No," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "I will lead this." Surprise flickered in Lyra's eyes. "But Alpha, your commitments—" "My commitments are secondary," Ronan interrupted, his tone definitive. "This supersedes them." He turned to his warriors, his expression hardening. Patrol concluded. "Secure the territory's perimeter. Lyra and I will investigate this scent." The warriors exchanged uneasy glances. They had never witnessed such obsession in their Alpha. But they dared not question him. Acknowledging his command, they vanished back into the forest, leaving Ronan and Lyra alone. Lyra watched them depart, her eyes narrowed. Intimately familiar with Ronan's nature, she sensed this was no mere formality. This was personal. And that spelled trouble. "So," she began, turning to Ronan, her voice carefully devoid of emotion. "Where do we start?" Ronan offered no reply. He closed his eyes again, inhaling deeply, allowing the scent to guide him. He surged forward, his stride resolute, Lyra struggling to keep up. "Alpha," she persisted, "are you certain this is wise? We're ignorant of what we face." Ronan halted abruptly, turning to face her. His eyes were like pools of liquid gold, burning with a fervor that sent tremors through her. "I don't care," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "It's meant for me. I feel it." He resumed his path, leaving Lyra standing alone, her face a mask of barely suppressed rage. A chilling certainty washed over her. Her life was on the cusp of irreversible change, and she was uncertain if she was ready. The scent lingered, an enticement and a warning. A siren song of fate, but threatened to either elevate or shatter her. She followed Ronan deeper into the woods, into the unknown, her hand instinctively resting on the hilt of her dagger, braced for the trials ahead. Freedom, she knew, was often bought with blood, and she was prepared to pay the cost. Claimed drawn by the alluring redolence, Ronan emerged from the thicket, his imposing physique cleaving the vegetation like a storm surge. Where the forest floor usually displayed somber hues, a riot of wildflowers painted this secluded glade, their rich perfume nearly eclipsing the compelling scent that had obsessed him. Nearly. He spotted them instantly. Ilara, beside a burbling brook, offered cupped water to Kale, who leaned against a verdant, moss-covered stone. The bond between them shimmered a hushed dialogue of shared trials and tenderness. Ronan's jaw hardened. He moved with surprising swiftness, devouring the space between them in a flash. The crunch of twigs betrayed his approach. Ilara reacted with a start, spinning around, her gaze widening with shock. Kale was upright in a heartbeat, poised to strike, his keen eyes narrowed, gauging the threat that emanated from Ronan. "Ronan," Ilara breathed, her tone a blend of astonishment and something akin to unease, or dawning awareness. Ronan dismissed her, his focus laser-locked on Kale. Raw power surged from him, a palpable aura of command that hushed the clearing, quieting the bird's trill and stilling the light breeze. "Rogue," he rumbled, the epithet laced with contempt. "You encroach upon Crescent Moon lands." Kale stood firm, his eyes burning with equal defiance. "This forest belongs to itself, Alpha. It answers to no one." Ronan advanced, his shadow swallowing Kale. "Everything within these borders bends to my will. I dictate who remains and who is banished." He angled his head slightly, finally acknowledging Ilara. The intoxicating fragrance washed over him anew, almost overwhelming. It originated from her. She was the epicenter. He stepped closer. Ilara flinched, her hand instinctively rising to her throat. Ronan's gaze bored into hers, dismantling her composure, breaching her carefully erected defenses. "You," he stated, his voice a low resonant tremor vibrating with undisguised hunger. "You are mine." Ilara gaped, her features paling, her eyes mirroring disbelief. "What?" she managed, the query barely audible. Ronan ignored her protest. He was transfixed. Every primal urge screamed its truth, declaring this undeniable rightness. Extending his hand, he encircled her wrist. The contact sent a jolt of raw energy through her, eliciting a gasp. "You are my true mate," he announced, his voice ringing through the glen. The declaration hung in the balance, pregnant with consequence, obliterating the fragile serenity they had discovered. Ilara wrenched her hand from his hold, her eyes now blazing with indignation. "No," she asserted, her voice quivering but unyielding. "I belong to no one." Ronan's expression grew severe. "Destiny is immutable," he pronounced, a sharp edge lacing his tone. "You are mine, Ilara, and I intend to possess what fate has ordained." Kale surged forward, interposing himself between Ronan and Ilara. "She is not yours to seize," he growled, his claws extending, catching the sunlight in lethal glints. "She is her own." Ronan's eyes narrowed, focusing on Kale with predatory intensity. "You dare defy me, rogue?" he hissed. "You dare position yourself between me and my mate?" The atmosphere crackled with menace, the scent of pine and damp earth mingling with the metallic premonition of violence. Ronan stalked towards Kale, his bulk eclipsing the rogue. He was an elemental force, an apex predator accustomed to immediate compliance. "She has made her decision," Kale stated, his voice firm despite the tremor that ran through him. "And it was not you." Ronan emitted a low growl, a sound that resonated deep within his chest, vibrating through the very ground beneath them. "Choice?" he scoffed. "You invoke choice? She is ignorant of the stakes. She cannot comprehend the unbreakable bond that binds us." Again, he reached out, his hand aimed towards Ilara. Kale reacted instantly, hurling himself at Ronan with ferocious abandon. He slashed with lightning speed, his claws raking across Ronan's chest. Ronan barely registered the attack. He was the stronger party, swifter, more seasoned. He seized Kale's wrist, his grip an unyielding vise. Kale cried out in agony, his claws retracting as Ronan twisted his arm, forcing him to his knees. "You are a fool, rogue," Ronan said, his tone icy and devoid of emotion. "You cannot shield her from me." "None can." He released Kale's arm, sending him sprawling across the earth. Ronan directed his focus back to Ilara, his eyes burning into hers. "Come with me, Ilara," he implored, his voice softening, tinged with entreaty. "Embrace your destiny. Embrace our shared fate." Ilara stared at him, her face a tableau of warring emotions. Fear, anger, confusion and something else. A feeling that contracted her stomach and quickened her pulse. A flicker of recognition. A spark of something more compelling? She glanced at Kale, prone on the ground, battered and subdued. His eyes reflected pain and a desperate supplication. He stood ready to fight for her, to die for her, and she knew, with a certainty that iced her to the core, that Ronan was prepared to extinguish him. Her destiny, he called it. Yet, was it destiny or simply an elaborate cage? Ronan's coarse cloak rasped against Ilara's skin as he propelled her forward, a forced march rather than a guiding hand. The air, heavy with the aromas of pine and rich soil, thrummed with a subtle resonance the collective life force of the Crescent Moon Pack. She fought down the urge to struggle, knowing it was futile, and instead tried to catalog every detail. The ancient sentinel trees gave way to a deliberate path, its stones worn smooth by generations of paws. This curated landscape stood in stark opposition to the chaotic wilderness she knew. The path spilled into a clearing unlike any she had imagined. Structures of hewn timber and quarried stone stood in precise alignment, their roofs catching the light with calculated efficiency. Blazing torches cast elongated, dancing shadows that highlighted the pack's emblem, a silver crescent etched into each doorway. Wolves, garbed in furs and cured hides, moved with focused energy, their gazes flicking to Ronan as he passed, each inclining their heads in respect. The sheer scale, the rigid control, felt stifling. A gilded cage. "Impressive, don't you think?" Ronan's voice, a low timbre beside her, dripped with a self-satisfied arrogance. He seemed to anticipate her surrender, her awe. Ilara met his gaze, her expression a carefully constructed mask. "Methodical," she conceded, offering no further praise. A muscle twitched in Ronan's jaw, a brief flash of irritation. "It's more than just method, Ilara. It's power, solidarity, qualities you've conspicuously lacked." She stifled a sharp retort about the distinction between loyalty and blind fealty, choosing silence. Argument, now, was pointless. A woman emerged from one of the larger structures, her movements a study in poised efficiency. Lyra Nightshade. Her obsidian hair was drawn back into a tight braid, emphasizing the sharp planes of her face. Eyes the color of a tempestuous sky narrowed as she scrutinized Ilara's travel-worn appearance. The air crackled with unspoken tension between the two women, a silent sizing but up, Ronan. Lyra's voice was cool and even. "I wasn't expecting you back so sooner with company." "Circumstances have shifted," Ronan replied, his gaze unwavering. He tightened his hold on Ilara's arm, a claim that sent a shiver of unease through her. "Ilara will be staying with us for a time." Lyra's face remained an enigma. "I understand. And where will she be quartered?" "She will, of course, be given guest accommodations," Ronan stated, his tone leaving no room for debate. "See to it, Lyra." Lyra gave a curt nod, her eyes lingering on Ilara for a beat before turning and gliding away. Ilara felt a cold thread of apprehension. This woman was dangerous, not through raw power, but through intellect and composure. She was a force of quiet strength. Ronan steered Ilara toward a smaller building, its entrance guarded by two hulking sentinels. They snapped to attention as he approached, their eyes fixed on Ilara with open suspicion. One of them, younger and more zealous, surged forward. "Alpha, is this?" He trailed off, unsure how to phrase the query. "This is Ilara," Ronan declared, his voice ringing with authority. "She is under my protection. Ensure her well-being." He fixed the younger wolf, Finn, with a stern look. "Finn, you will see to her needs. Provide her with everything she requires." Finn, visibly thrilled by the assignment, puffed out his chest like a fledgling bird. "Of course, Alpha. Immediately, Alpha." He swiveled toward Ilara, his eagerness almost manic. "Welcome to Crescent Moon, Ilara. I'm Finn. Anything at all. Just name it. Food, clothing, intel, anything." Ilara mustered a weak smile, overwhelmed by his effervescence. "Thank you, Finn," she managed, her voice barely audible. Ronan gave her arm a brief squeeze. "Get her settled, Finn. I have matters of state to attend to." He turned and strode away, leaving Ilara alone with the excessively enthusiastic young wolf. Finn positively vibrated with nervous energy. "So, guest quarters. This way." "They're not the Alpha's personal suite, naturally," he added quickly, "but they're very comfortable. We have indoor plumbing. Well, it's channeled from the creek, but it's still indoor. And a real bed. Not just a bed of leaves or whatever." Ilara followed him inside, trying to ignore the weight of Ronan's pronouncements, the possessive touch on her arm, the assessing looks of the pack members. The room was small but tidy, furnished with a basic wooden bed, a table, and a chair. A cheerful fire snapped in the hearth, bathing the space in a warm glow. It was far more luxurious than anything she had previously known, yet felt like a confinement cell. "Is there an exit?" Ilara asked, her voice tight with suppressed anxiety. Finn blinked, his brow creasing in confusion. "Exit?" "Well, sure. The door." Why would you want to leave? He seemed genuinely perplexed. The Alpha has given you sanctuary. This is a haven. We have anything a wolf could wish for. Ilara turned away, unable to meet his innocent gaze. He couldn't possibly grasp the burning need for freedom that consumed her. He had never known anything beyond the structure and shelter of the pack. I need some air, she said, striving for nonchalance. I've been traveling for a while. Oh, absolutely. Fresh air is vital. Finn agreed readily. I can give you a tour of the territory. We have an incredible cascade just past the training grounds. And the elder tree is truly majestic. They say it's lived for centuries. Ilara forced another smile. Perhaps later, Finn. Right now, I just need to breathe. Finn, finally detecting her discomfort, retreated a step. Okay. I get it. I'll let you unpack then. But please, don't hesitate to call if you need anything. Anything at all. He scurried out of the room, leaving Ilara alone with her thoughts. She went to the window, watching the constant activity of the pack. Wolves drilled in the training fields, their snarls and grunts echoing through the grounds. Others toiled in the gardens, tending neat rows of crops and herbs. Children played, their laughter somehow muted within the structured environment. It was a well-oiled mechanism, each member playing their designated role, contributing to the greater good. But Ilara couldn't shake the sensation that something was amiss. Beneath the veneer of order and unity, she detected a current of unease, a latent tension threatening to shatter the surface. She saw it in furtive glances, hushed whispers, and the way pack members avoided sustained eye contact. And she knew, with growing dread, that her arrival had only fanned the flames. Gifts and obligations, the room radiated a dazzling aura. Not from magic, although the Crescent Moon Pack lands hummed with latent power, but from the sheer lavishness of Ronins. Enticements. Silks cascaded over the chaise, mimicking captured starlight. Gleaming emeralds winked from within velvet recesses, and exquisitely crafted boots rested delicately amongst layers of tissue. Ilara remained immobile, arms folded tight, feeling less like a treasured guest and more like an exhibit. Ronan, she began, her voice. This is a bit much. He was silhouetted against the window, bathed in the honeyed light of late afternoon, an effect that amplified his already imposing stature. Turning, he offered a predatory smile. Nothing is too extravagant for someone precious. Ilara avoided his gaze, letting her eyes linger on the fine needlework of an azure gown. It possessed an irrefutable beauty, yet felt like a burden, a gilded cage woven from silk and gemstone. I have no need of such things. A chuckle resonated from Ronan, a deep tremor that stirred the very air. Everyone craves something, Ilara. These are mere overtures, small tokens of my regard. He closed the distance between them, his scent a complex tapestry of resinous pine, damp earth, and a feral undercurrent enveloped her, a palpable weight. She recoiled slightly, her fingers instinctively finding the small, time-worn pouch hidden within the folds of her simple tunic, her last tether to a life she knew. My regard isn't bought with baubles, Ronan. The smile flickered, almost imperceptibly, but she registered the change. What then? What must I do, Ilara Meadowsweet, to gain your good graces? A sharp tone edged his voice, the alpha straining against the leash. She met his gaze head-on, lifting her chin. His eyes were slivers of obsidian, unyielding and inscrutable. My liberty, my agency. Amusement flickered across Ronan's face, a genuine spark of mirth. Liberty, you possess it. You are here, sheltered, secure. What more could you possibly desire? A bitter taste bloomed on Ilara's tongue. Sheltered. They all used that word. Her parents, before the crimson moon descended. Cale, when he insisted on keeping her out of sight afterward. Protection always demanded a sacrifice. I want to wake each day and decide my path, choose my actions, determine my companions. I want to hunt my own meals, repair my own garments, and sleep beneath the celestial canopy, unbound by anyone's dictates. The words poured forth, fueled by weeks of simmering discontent. Ronan's expression softened. A fleeting glimpse of what might have been comprehension appeared in his eyes. Those are unassuming aspirations. Unassuming does not equate to inconsequential. He reached out, his fingertips ghosting against her cheek. Ilara recoiled, and he drew back his hand at once. I understand that you have known a sequestered existence, but here, you would never be burdened by anxieties over survival. You would not need to forage and toil endlessly. You could possess every conceivable delight. Ilara closed her eyes, a swell of yearning washing over her. She pictured Cale, his face etched with worry as he tended to her arm after a botched boar hunt. She recalled the comforting weight of his calloused hand clasped in hers as they navigated the silent woods, the shared laughter echoing around a lively campfire, the unspoken understanding that permeated their bond. Flashback: the fragrance of wood smoke clung to Ilara's hair as she stirred the stew, its meager contents simmering in the scarred pot. Cale sat close by, honing his knife, his movements a study in practiced efficiency. The fire danced merrily, painting the trees with playful shadows. Nearly ready, she murmured, her voice gentle. Cale grunted in acknowledgement, his gaze fixed on his task. He was perpetually vigilant, an unspoken promise of protection gleaming in his eyes, as if expecting some unseen menace to materialize from the darkness. You fret too much, Ilara chided lightly, bumping him with her elbow. He finally glanced up, a wry smile playing at the edges of his lips. And you, my dear, don't fret enough. Ilara laughed softly. Someone has to embrace optimism. They ate in peaceful accord, their only company the chirping of insects and the rustling of foliage. Afterward, they lay entwined, sharing a threadbare blanket, watching the firmament ablaze with starlight. Do you ever long for it? Ilara asked, her voice barely audible. Cale understood her unspoken query. He had shared stories of his past life, of the pack he'd been born into, the obligations he had cast aside. A long silence hung between them. Sometimes, but I would not exchange this for anything. He turned to face her, his eyes filled with a fierce devotion. Not for all the influence the world could offer. Ilara snuggled closer, burying her face against his shoulder. She knew his words were true. He had relinquished everything for her, for their elusive independence, and that love encompassed her whole being. End flashback. The memory receded, leaving Ilara with a sharp pang of loss. Every conceivable delight, except the one thing her soul craved. She opened her eyes, a steely resolve hardening her gaze. I spurn your gifts, Ronan. I desire to leave. His face became a mask of thunder. That is untenable. Why? Is it simply because you forbid it? Because the dangers are ever present. Rogue clans roam free. Crimson moon patrols cast long shadows. You would not survive a day unescorted. His voice dripped with feigned concern, but Ilara saw it for what it was. Coercion masquerading as solicitude. I survived prior to your intervention. And you existed on the precipice of starvation, perpetually pursued and isolated. Is that the life you genuinely long for? It was my decision. Ronan sighed heavily, raking a hand through his dark locks. Ilara, I am endeavoring to offer you a superior existence. A life defined by ease, security, and companionship. Companionship. The word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Ilara perceived his intentions. He sought her as his Luna, his chosen mate, his queen. He coveted her scent, her power, her very being. I am grateful for your proposition, Ronan, but I am not receptive. His eyes narrowed, the polished obsidian morphing into something sharper, more menacing. You cannot refute the connection that binds us, Ilara. It exists, regardless of your inclinations. A connection does not dictate my course. Perhaps not, but it decidedly complicates it. He moved closer, invading her personal domain. Give it time, Ilara. You will perceive the truth. This is your destined home. He turned and strode back to the window, his back presented to her. Contemplate the presence, reflect upon my offerings, and always remember, your well-being remains my utmost concern. Ilara watched him, her heart hammering against her ribs. He was a person of tremendous influence, a powerful alpha, and he was resolved to claim her as his own. But Ilara Meadowsweet was not easily dominated. She would not be reduced to a prize to be flaunted, a possession to be controlled. She would unearth a path to escape, to reclaim her lost autonomy. And perhaps, just perhaps, she would find her way back to Kale. A rogue's shadow pine needles and the earthy fragrance of decaying leaves clung to Kale's coat as he hunkered down, a creature of shadow swallowed by the descending gloom. From his perch atop the ridge, Ronan's sprawling compound was visible, light spilling from its windows like a gaudy wound upon the wilderness he cherished. His gaze, intense and unwavering, locked onto Ilara, a solitary figure on the balcony. Even at this remove, he felt the ache of her despair like a physical blow. The droop of her shoulders, the vacant way she regarded the forest, painted a portrait of a caged spirit yearning for release. A simmering fury roiled within Kale, a low growl vibrating in his frame. Ronan had abducted her, shattering the delicate equilibrium they'd achieved, the secluded sanctuary they'd carved from the heart of the wild. He shifted, dislodging loose scree, his eyes glued to the scene as Ronan approached Ilara. Even from here, Kale could almost taste the alpha's hubris, the possessive grasp on her arm, the unheard words he murmured close to her ear. His fists clenched, claws scoring the earth. He yearned to rend Ronan, to obliterate him and reclaim Ilara, pulling her back into the shelter of his embrace. Yet he knew such action was premature. He was a lone wolf facing an entire pack, a renegade against a power that would obliterate him without pause. Strategy was needed. Intel. And he knew where to find it. He dissolved into the shadows, moving with the lithe grace of a phantom. He threaded through the dense undergrowth, his senses hyper-alert to every whisper of the wind, every snap of a twig. This territory was etched into his soul, every hidden trail, every secluded hollow. He dedicated his life to surviving in the wilderness, existing on the periphery, a specter in the awareness of the packs. The air chilled as he neared the ancient oak, a sentinel marking the pack's boundary. Its limbs, gnarled and weathered, clawed at the sky, its roots a deep anchor in the earth, testament to its enduring presence. Here, in the oak's long shadow, dwelled Elder Bramble. Kale halted at the clearing's edge, his gaze sweeping the area. Bramble was ever vigilant, ever observant, Surprise was impossible. He stepped into the clearing, his posture respectful, his tone hushed. Elder Bramble, the ancient wolf, materialized from the darkness, his amber eyes focusing on Kale. Though his fur bore the silver of age, his form remained imposing, his presence radiating authority. Kale Shadowclaw, what compels you to trespass? His voice was a deep rumble, seasoned with wariness. I seek information, Kale stated, his gaze steady. Regarding Ronan's pack, Bramble inclined his head, his expression enigmatic. Information carries a steep price, Kale, especially concerning an alpha such as Ronan. I understand the stakes, Kale responded, his voice sharpening. Ilara is trapped within those walls, held against her will. A flicker of something, perhaps compassion, perhaps understanding, touched Bramble's features. Ronan believes she is his destined mate. Destiny is forged by choice. Kale spat, the words laced with animosity. Ilara chose me. Bramble sighed, a sound like wind whispering through dry leaves. Ronan sees only what he wants to see. He is a formidable alpha, Kale, driven by ambition and a relentless need for control. He will not easily relinquish what he believes is his right. Then I will wrest her free, Kale asserted, his claws extending slightly. Reveal the pack's vulnerabilities. Show me how to breach their defenses. Bramble slowly shook his head. That I cannot do, Kale. I am bound to safeguard my pack, not to aid a rogue in destabilizing it. Stability? Kale scoffed. Ronan's stability is built on intimidation and force. He rules with an iron will. He cares nothing for his pack, only for his own dominion. That may be, Bramble conceded, but he remains our alpha, and I will not betray that trust. Kale closed the distance between them, his eyes blazing with intensity. Then tell me about Lyra, Ronan's second. Her hunger for power rivals his. What are her ambitions? Her weaknesses? Bramble hesitated, his gaze momentarily wavering. Lyra is ambitious, yes. She has served Ronan faithfully, but she also covets the Luna position. She believes she is better suited than Ilara. And that makes her pliant, Kale observed, a spark of calculation igniting his eyes. She would benefit from Ilara's removal. Perhaps, Bramble conceded, his voice low and cautious. But do not underestimate her, Kale. She is sharp and devoid of pity. She will use you without pause if it advances her agenda. Her machinations are of no concern, Kale said, his voice hard. My only fear is losing Ilara. Bramble sighed once more, his gaze softening almost imperceptibly. Ronan's strength surpasses your estimates, Kale. He commands allies, both within the pack and beyond. And Lyra is not alone in desiring your failure. Others believe Ilara's presence threatens their own standing. Then I will confront them all, Kale vowed, his voice ringing with resolute purpose. I will dismantle their defenses, shatter their alliances, execute whatever measures are necessary to bring her back. Bramble placed a hand on Kale's shoulder, his grip surprisingly firm. Proceed with caution, Kale. This is not a conflict you can expect to win without help. And if you fail, Ronan will show no restraint. Kale met his gaze, his eyes reflecting a sorrow that countered his fierce determination. I understand the consequences, Elder Bramble, but I cannot stand idly by. Ilara is the bedrock of my existence, and I will not allow Ronan to steal her away from me. He paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. Even at the cost of everything I possess. He turned and vanished into the shadows, leaving Bramble alone beneath the ancient oak. The elder watched him go, his expression etched with concern. He knew Cale was walking into a snare, a web of lies and danger that threatened to consume him. But he also knew that his resolve was unwavering. Love, in its purest form, possessed the raw strength of nature itself, as relentless and capricious as a gathering storm. And Cale Shadowclaw was a force to be reckoned with. Whispers of treachery, the aroma of pine and dewy earth, typically a balm to Ilara. A whisper of the free forest she'd once known was now soured. The metallic reek clinging to Ronan's possessions, a declaration of ownership and confinement, suffused even this solace. Her assigned task in the pack kitchen, root vegetable prep for the evening meal, was designed to occupy, and more importantly, display her. Yet, the stifling air within the main house choked her. She yearned for open space, a moment free from prying eyes. Fabricating a need for fresh herbs, Ilara slipped through the rear entrance, the cool evening air a welcome caress. She drifted toward the boundary of the pack's domain, where the wilderness asserted its claim. The clamor of pack-life hearty guffaws, the rasp of sharpening blades, the deep thrum of conversations subsided, replaced by the soughing of leaves and the trill of insects. Then she detected them. Voices, hushed and urgent, riding on the breeze. They emanated from a dense hawthorn thicket, its spiny branches a natural barrier. Curiosity, a perilous but constant companion, beckoned. This wasn't mere nosiness. A raw tension in the speakers echoed the disquiet that had plagued her since her arrival. Soundlessly, she drew closer, her steps as light as drifting feathers, identifying the speakers. One was undeniably Lyra. The other, a deeper, rougher timbre, remained unfamiliar. "He's become lax," Lyra spat, her tone sharp with impatience. "Relying on brute strength, on this true mate fairy tale. He's blind to the currents swirling around him." "And you believe yourself better suited?" The second voice countered, laced with doubt. "Leading this pack requires more than grand pronouncements, Lyra. The elders back Ronan the warriors are loyal." "Loyalty bought or shattered," Lyra retorted, a glint of steel in her voice. "The elders are traditional, yes, that they also prize stability. And Ronan's fixation on this she-wolf smacks of anything but. It is a weakness ripe for exploitation." Ilara's breath caught. She knew with icy certainty that this she-wolf meant her. She flattened against the shadows, her pulse hammering against her ribs. "Exploitation how?" the other voice pressed. "Ronan isn't a fool. He'll detect a frontal assault." "We don't require one," Lyra hissed, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. "We sow seeds of doubt, of dissent, undermine his judgment, his command. A few choice whispers, a few unfortunate incidents that highlight mispriorities. And when the moment arrives, we present them with a superior choice. A Luna dedicated to the pack's welfare, not distracted by some outsider." "What of the true mate bond?" the voice questioned, a note of caution seeping in. "The pack believes." "Contradicting that could backfire spectacularly," Lyra scoffed derisively. "Beliefs can be reshaped. Moreover, is it truly a bond if only one feels it? Ronan is convinced, consumed even. But has she exhibited reciprocal feelings? All I perceive is bitterness, defiance. The pack will see it too, with the proper guidance." Silence descended, punctuated only by the rustle of leaves. Ilara felt the weight of Lyra's words, the chilling calculation of her ambition. "What is it you require of me?" The other voice finally conceded, the skepticism yielding to grim acceptance. Lyra's voice brightened, a predatory satisfaction seeping through. Disseminate the narrative. Focus on the unrest among the border patrols. They're overstretched, combating rogue incursions. Suggest Ronan cares more about protecting his pet than securing the territory. Emphasize the resources funneled toward her comforts. Subtlety is paramount. We cannot risk raising suspicion. The exchange continued for several minutes, dwelling on specific plans identifying susceptible pack members, fabricating incidents, subtle methods to erode Ronan's authority. Ilara absorbed it all, her mind reeling. She'd stumbled into a den of vipers, a web of treachery poised to devour the pack. As the voices faded, signaling the conspirators' departure, Ilara remained rooted, every sense heightened. The forest, once a sanctuary, now felt ominous, teeming with unseen eyes and unheard whispers. She understood now. Ronan's pack was not a unified whole, bonded by loyalty and shared purpose. It was a battleground, a perpetual power struggle, and she had become a pawn. The true mate bond, the destiny Ronan so fiercely embraced, was simply a weapon to wield against him. Lyra didn't see her as a rival for Ronan's affections, but as a lever to bring about his ruin. At last, Ilara stirred, her muscles stiff and aching from her vigil. She needed to return to the house, feign ignorance. Yet, everything had shifted. She was no longer just a prisoner, a reluctant mate. She was a threat, a liability, a target of both Ronan and Lyra. She hurried back toward the kitchen, the scent of the simmering stew now heavy and sickening. Mechanically, she resumed peeling roots, her hands moving automatically, her mind racing. Who could she trust? Ronan was obsessed, controlling, but Lyra was cunning and utterly without scruples. Both were perilous, in vastly different ways, and she was trapped between them, without allies, without recourse. She glanced about the kitchen, at the other pack members milling around, their faces reflecting a blend of exhaustion and resolve. Were some complicit in Lyra's scheme? Were they scrutinizing her, awaiting a misstep? A shudder traced her spine. She was alone, surrounded by adversaries, and her sole hope lay in unraveling their plots before they consumed her. She had to be cautious, observant, and above all, devise an escape, warn Kale, reclaim her autonomy. The roots felt frigid and devoid of life, a chilling premonition of the icy, lifeless future that awaited should she fail. The price of loyalty. The air had curdled the instant Ilara crossed the threshold of Ronan's dwelling. It wasn't overt, just the tightening of lips and sidelong glances from the pack members she encountered, a brittle quality to their perfunctory greetings. The fragile warmth that had begun to melt her guarded heart seemed to have solidified into something brittle and cold. Eavesdropping on Lyra's machinations was one thing, experiencing their corrosive effects was a different kind of gut punch. The usual solace she found in the scent of damp earth and pine needles was now heightened to a gnawing disquiet beneath her skin. A cluster of younger wolves, who typically badgered her for sparring sessions, peeled away, their playful growls exchanged for downcast eyes. Had Lyra's poison already seeped this far? She discovered Finn near the training circle, struggling with an intricate staff maneuver. A tangle of limbs and awkward angles. His youthful zeal far outstripped his ability. "Finn!" Ilara called, and he nearly fumbled the staff, color flooding his cheeks. "Ilara, didn't realize you were there." He scrambled upright, his customary grin flickering. "Everything okay?" she asked, knowing the answer before the words left her lips. He scuffed the earth, avoiding her gaze. "Yeah, everything's fine. Just practicing." He spun the staff, nearly whacking himself in the head. Ilara sighed inwardly. A good kid, but subtlety wasn't in his nature. Finn, you can be honest with me. He hesitated, darting glances around as if the trees themselves had ears. It's just there's talk. Talk about what? Ilara pressed gently. He worried his lip. About you. About your history. A knot formed in Ilara's stomach. She'd tried to bury her past, outrun the specters that dogged her steps, but they'd finally drawn level. What's being said? She managed, the words barely audible. Things whispers about why you were alone. About your family. Finn's voice was thick with unease. He clearly regretted being the messenger. And who's the source of these tales? Ilara pressed, her eyes hardening. Finn stared at his worn boots. Lyra said it was vital the pack understand who they were entrusting, that Ronan deserved the truth. The atmosphere seemed to thicken, constricting her lungs. Lyra was systematically dismantling her, brick by brick. It wasn't merely an attempt to supplant Ronan. It was a deliberate attempt to shatter Ilara. And do you give credence to these accounts, Finn? Ilara asked, her voice a low, steady current. He lifted his gaze, his blue eyes pools of conflict. No. Well, I don't know. I like you, Ilara. You've shown me kindness. But Lyra, she's powerful. And close to Ronan. Ilara understood. Finn was caught in the agonizing crossfire of loyalty to his alpha and his own burgeoning moral compass. He was being coerced into choosing sides, terrified of the consequence of choosing incorrectly. The insidious rod of power was infecting even the youngest members. Thank you for confiding in me, Finn, Ilara replied, offering a wan, sad smile. Your candor is appreciated. Relief visibly washed over him, grateful he hadn't completely ruined things. Lyra, she resents Ronan's focus on you, believes it diminishes him, thinks she'd make a stronger leader. So, it wasn't solely about dredging up Ilara's ghosts. It was about Lyra's naked ambition, her insatiable craving for dominion. Ilara was simply a means to an end. A tool for prying Ronan from his pack. Be wary, Finn, Ilara cautioned. Lyra is engaged in a hazardous game, and she won't hesitate to sacrifice anyone to win. He nodded, his face drawn with anxiety. I will. And Ilara, I wish this gets easier for you. Ilara watched him depart, his shoulders bowed beneath the burden of divided fealties. Once more she was an island, more cut off than ever. The murmurs, the suspicions, the veiled animosity, they were all converging, pressing down on her. Later, at the evening assembly for sustenance, the sea change was irrefutable. Wolves who once greeted her with warmth now looked through her. Conversations died in their throats as she approached. She felt like an interloper, an exile within her own community. Ronan was occupied with pack matters, rendering her susceptible to Lyra's manipulations. Lyra held court at the head of the table, her silver eyes gleaming with icy gratification as she observed Ilara. No words were exchanged, no courteous smiles offered, but her quiet victory was plain. She'd poisoned the communal well. And Ilara was now forced to drink. Ilara toyed with her food, her appetite vanquished. The stew tasted like ashes in her mouth. She scanned the assembly, seeking a glimmer of support, a flicker of empathy, but encountered only mistrust and veiled scorn. Even Kai, who had initially seemed receptive, averted his eyes. Had Lyra ensnared him too? Was everyone within this pack vulnerable to her sway? As the meal concluded, Ilara slipped away, unable to endure the weight of their collective judgment a moment longer. She retreated to Ronan's cabin, hoping to find some solace in his lingering presence, the faint echo of his touch. But even within those walls, she found no sanctuary. The cabin felt like an ornate trap, a constant reminder of her vulnerability. She drifted to the window, her gaze drawn to the woods beyond. The trees stood defiant and grand, their branches reaching towards the heavens. They were unfettered, untamed, unburdened by the petty power plays of the pack. A wave of longing surged through her, a desperate yearning for the untamed wilderness, for the solitude she had once known. She wanted to flee, to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the pack, to locate Kale, to reclaim her identity. But she knew it was not yet an option. She had to expose Lyra's deceit, to safeguard Finn, to devise a means of alerting Kale. She had to fight for her liberation, even if it meant confronting the full force of Lyra's malice. As night deepened, Ilara remained alone in the cabin, the silence punctuated only by the snapping of the fire, trapped, isolated, and exposed, but not vanquished. A spark of resistance still flickered within her, fueled by her love for Kale and her resolution to reclaim her stolen existence. She would not be a mere pawn in Lyra's insidious game. She would unearth a path to freedom, even if it demanded the ultimate sacrifice. Cost of loyalty, she was acutely aware, could be steep, but she was prepared to meet it to shield those she held dear. Confrontation at the border, the air thrummed, thick with unspoken animosity. At the edge of Crescent Moonland, Kale inhaled, deeply, pine and loam, a wild, earthy fragrance tainted by Ronan's pack. A sharp, feral tang. Ilara's essence, a delicate whisper of lavender tinged with defiance, drew him onward, even through Lyra's heavy saccharine perfume. Fear, a cold knot in his gut, propelled him. He couldn't lose her, not to Ronan's possessive grip, not to the stifling rituals of pack life. Then, a figure materialized from the dense woods. Ronan. His broad frame exuded raw power. Recognition flashed in eyes the color of a brewing squall. A guttural growl resonated from deep within him, vibrating through Kale's bones. Shadowclaw. Ronan's voice, a gravelly rasp, dripped with scorn. A lone wolf straying onto my territory? Surely you aren't lost. Kale's jaw hardened, refusing the bait. His gaze met Ronan's, burning with unwavering resolve. I'm here for Ilara. Ronan's features tightened. Ilara resides under my protection, within the Crescent Moonfold, where she belongs. His words were an ironclad decree. She belongs to no one, Kale retorted, his voice laced with barely leashed fury. Least of all, a pack. Ilara deserves freedom, at the very least the chance to choose it. Freedom? Ronan scoffed, advancing a step. His alpha aura crackled around him. A wolf severed from its pack is adrift, without anchor. She needs direction. Stability commodities you, in your solitary existence, cannot provide. Direction? Stability? Kale's laugh was a harsh, brittle sound. You call this imprisonment guidance. A gilded cage stability? She's withering under your so-called protection, Ronan. Can't you see? Ronan's eyes glinted dangerously. You presume to understand Ilara's desires? You? A mere acquaintance? I know her spirit, Kale countered, his voice low and deliberate. I know the fire that fuels her. You may claim a bond, Ronan, but her heart remains untouched by you. It belongs to me. He closed the gap between them. The air vibrated with Ronan's ire, a palpable pressure mingling with the forest's scent. I love her, Ronan, with a depth you cannot fathom, and I will contest your claim. Ronan's fists clenched, a muscle twitching in his jaw. Love? You speak of sentimentality, as if it is a bauble to be exchanged. This transcends mere affection, Shadowclaw. It is destiny. Ilara is my fated mate. Our connection is etched in the stars, woven into the fabric of our very beings. Destiny is not immutable, Kale challenged, his voice ringing with conviction. Fate is not a prison, Ronan. It is a path, and the choice of which to walk rests with us. Ilara deserves to forge her own destiny, not be shackled by some antiquated notion of true mates. You dare defy the ancient laws? Ronan roared, the sound reverberating through the woods. His body convulsed as his form shifted, bones reshaping themselves in a brutal display of dominance. He loomed over Kale, a monstrous wolf cloaked in midnight fur, eyes blazing with primal fire. I am the Alpha, Shadowclaw. My will is law, and Ilara is mine. Kale stood firm, unwavering. He knew he couldn't overcome Ronan's raw strength in a direct confrontation, but he possessed something Ronan lacked, an unyielding love, a powerful catalyst for courage. You may be an alpha, Ronan, but you are a despot. You confuse possession with love, control with devotion. Ilara is not a trophy to be flaunted, a territory to be seized. She is a woman, with her own thoughts, her own affections, her own aspirations. Enough! Ronan surged forward, his fangs snapping inches from Kale's face. Kale sidestepped the attack, narrowly evading the blow. He couldn't win a battle of brute force. He needed to exploit Ronan's hubris, his possessiveness. You declare her your true mate. Then why does she resist your advances? Why does she cast longing glances in my direction? Doubt flickered across Ronan's face, a momentary lapse. Kale seized the opening. You can dominate her body, Ronan, but you can never subdue her spirit. And without her spirit, your victory is hollow. Ronan snarled, frustration radiating from him. He stalked back and forth, his gaze boring into Kale. You are a fool, Shadowclaw. You risk your life for a woman who will never reciprocate. Retreat now, leave my domain, and I may consider sparing your life. I would gladly sacrifice my life for her, Kale responded, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. But I won't abandon her to languish under your tyranny. I will fight you for her, Ronan. Every step of the way. Ronan unleashed a deafening bellow that shook the very ground beneath them. You have sealed your fate, Shadowclaw. Prepare to suffer the consequences. He lunged again, but this time Kale was prepared. He evaded the attack and melted into the undergrowth, moving with the fluid grace of a phantom. Ronan stood alone at the border, his chest heaving, rage consuming him. He had underestimated Kale's tenacity. He had assumed the rogue would be easily cowed, easily dismissed. But he was mistaken. Kale Shadowclaw was a force, a threat to his standing, a challenge to his rights. And Ronan knew, with a cold certainty, that this conflict had only just begun. A plea for peace, the atmosphere throbbed, charged not only by the approaching tempest, but by the unleashed might of Kale and Ronan. The coppery tang of blood mingled with the damp, loamy scent rising from the forest floor, where fallen leaves lay slick with pre-storm moisture. A guttural growl resonated from Ronan, shaking the earth beneath Ilara's feet. Kale echoed the sound, his gaze ignited with a savage light she'd only witnessed in fleeting glimpses. Each man stood as a primal force, ready to erupt. Her breath hitched. This had to be a nightmare. Stop! Ilara's cry sliced through the building pressure, a desperate entreaty all but lost to the rising wind. Lunging forward, she planted herself between them, arms outstretched as if she could physically restrain their animosity. Please, stop this madness. What are you doing? Ronan's gaze, like molten gold, sharpened on her. Ilara, move aside. You're not involved. Though his tone commanded, a tremor of what? Concern? Underlay his words. It's everything to me, she countered, her voice wavering despite her efforts to steady it. Her gaze darted between them, from Ronan's braced stance and white-knuckled fists to Cale's coiled readiness. I can't bear to see either of you injured. A shade of tenderness flickered across Cale's face when their eyes met, momentarily eclipsing the burning fury. Ilara, he abducted you. He has no claimee, and you think battling him is the solution? She demanded, her voice rising. Is this your definition of love, Cale? Jeopardizing lives, both yours and his? What's the prize? A wounded ego? His jaw clenched, a muscle twitching. It's about reclaiming your freedom, Ilara. He's holding you captive. Ronan scoffed, derision twisting his lips. Captive? She's my mate. She belongs here, with me. The declaration hung, heavy and suffocating, a pronouncement that felt like a blow. Ilara recoiled. I belong nowhere, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I belong to no one. Tears blurred her vision, the warring emotions threatening to drown her fear for Cale, simmering resentment toward Ronan, and the confusing, unwelcome pull she felt towards him, a sensation she desperately fought to deny. I don't comprehend any of this, she confessed, her voice fracturing. I don't understand what's happening within me. Why you're fighting over me as if I'm a bauble to be won. She focused on Ronan, searching his expression for a glimmer of understanding, of empathy. You claim I'm your mate, that we're bound together. But destiny shouldn't feel like imprisonment. It shouldn't feel like a battlefield. Turning to Cale, her heart ached at the raw pain etched on his features. And you claim you love me. But love isn't about winning battles on my behalf. It's about honoring my choices, my feelings. It's about allowing me to be myself. A sob burst free. I'm afraid, she admitted, her vulnerability laid bare. I'm afraid of these feelings, of the emptiness. I dread hurting either of you. Please just stop. The forest hushed. The tension, while still palpable, had subtly shifted, tempered by Ilara's raw honesty. Both Ronan and Cale seemed momentarily taken aback by her outburst, their rage faltering in the face of her anguish. That sliver of hesitation, that fleeting moment of grace, provided Lyra with her chance. Lurking in the shadows, her eyes narrowed, her expression a taut mask of suppressed rage, Ilara's words, her vulnerability, had clearly ignited her fury. With startling speed, she lunged forward, a silver dagger flashing in her grasp. Her quarry wasn't Ronan. It was Cale. The blade targeted his back, a swift, decisive stroke aimed at eliminating the threat to her alpha, her claim. Ilara saw it unfold in slow motion. The glint of silver, the predatory gleam in Lyra's eyes, the unwavering path of the dagger. She screamed, a cry of pure, unadulterated terror. Ronan, however, proved quicker. Unleashing a roar that shook the very trees, he surged forward, intercepting Lyra's attack. He deflected the dagger with a violent swipe of his hand, the impact sending Lyra staggering backward. But in that heartbeat, Ronan had exposed himself. Cale, reacting instinctively to the danger, seized the moment. He lunged at Ronan, claws extended, his fury renewed with a vengeance. This time, Ilara remained paralyzed. Frozen in place by fear and shock, she could only watch in stark horror as the two men collided, their fight reignited with a savagery that dwarfed anything she'd previously witnessed. The forest floor transformed into a brutal theater, a chaotic vortex of muscle, fur, and fang. The atmosphere thickened with the reek of blood and raw fury, the cacophony of snarls and growls reverberating through the trees. Ilara stood there, utterly helpless, her plea for peace shattered, her heart breaking with each savage blow. She felt rent apart, like a leaf caught in a gale, powerless to aid either one. Covering her ears, she squeezed her eyes shut, desperate to block out the brutal reality unfolding before her. She could sense the ground quaking beneath her, the tremors of their struggle resonating through her very bones. When she eventually dared to open her eyes, the scene that greeted her was even more appalling than she'd imagined. Ronan and Cale were locked in a deadly embrace, their bodies glistening with blood, their faces distorted by rage. Ronan had Cale pinned, his claws shredding his throat. Cale, in turn, had sunk his teeth deep into Ronan's shoulder, his grip unyielding. "Stop it!" Ilara screamed again, her voice ragged and desperate. "Please, stop! You're going to kill each other." But her words were swallowed by the storm of violence. They were beyond reason, consumed by primal instinct and unchecked rage. She watched, helpless, as Ronan raised a claw, poised to deliver the final blow. This couldn't be the end. She couldn't permit this to happen. Summoning a reserve of strength she didn't realize she possessed, Ilara threw herself onto Ronan, clinging to his back, her arms locked around his neck. "Ronan, please! Don't do this!" Her weight, though insignificant compared to his immense power, proved enough of a distraction. He hesitated, his claws hovering mere inches from Cale's throat. "Ilara, unhand me," he growled, his voice strained. "You don't comprehend. I comprehend that you're about to commit murder," she cried, her voice cracking. "I comprehend that this isn't love. This is madness." Ronan's grip loosened slightly, his body trembling. He glanced down at her, his eyes reflecting a torment that mirrored her own. In that instant, Cale saw his opening. With a surge of adrenaline, he threw Ronan off, scrambling to his feet. He stood there gasping, his body marked and bleeding, but his eyes still blazed with defiance. "Ilara, come with me," he said, his voice raw. "Let's leave this place. Now." Ilara looked from Cale to Ronan, her heart clenching with uncertainty. She yearned to flee, to escape this nightmare. But she couldn't abandon Ronan in his broken, defeated state. I can't," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Cale's face crumbled, his eyes filled with disbelief and torment. "What? But why?" "I just can't," she repeated, tears streaming down her face. "Not like this." Turning from Cale, she knelt beside Ronan, reaching to touch his face, her fingers trembling. "Ronan," she said softly, "are you all right?" His eyes met hers, and for a fleeting moment she glimpsed something beneath the rage and pain. A spark of vulnerability, of hope, but the moment vanished, the darkness returning, consuming him entirely. He pushed her hand away, his expression hardening. "Leave me," he said, his voice frigid and distant. "I never want to see you again." Ilara recoiled. Night of betrayal, the deluge mirrored the turmoil consuming Ronan. Ilara's rejection, sharper than any blade, reverberated in his skull, an ache rivaling Cale's earlier blows. He stood defeated, shoulders bowed, the image of her defending Cale etched into his memory. His pack, his strength, his very core felt shattered. Only a saccharine sweetness, utterly alien, jolted him into awareness of Lyra's approach. "Ronan," she purred, the honeyed tone usually a balm, now a chilling prelude. He met her gaze in the firelight, finding her expression a blank canvas. "You're injured. Allow me." A jolt of agony ripped through his flank. He gasped, reeling. Lyra stood before him, a silver dirk weeping crimson in her grasp. The warmth had vanished from her eyes, replaced by a glacial resolve. "This is for the good of the pack, Ronan," she hissed, wrenching free the blade. "Your weakness and obsession have made you unfit to lead." Chaos erupted, the rain-drenched clearing becoming a theater of war. Conspirators, concealed within the pack, now revealed themselves, snarling with undisguised malice. The trail permeated the air, a suffocating miasma. Loyalists roared back, instinctively safeguarding their alpha, yet Lyra held the advantage of surprise. Clutching his bleeding side, Ronan felt his vital force ebbing. The silver seared, amplifying the wound's effect. He spotted Ilara, paralyzed amidst the fray, her face a canvas of horror. Cale, having recovered, threaded through the melee, his gaze laser-focused on Ronan, only to be intercepted by Lyra's cohorts. "Lyra!" Ronan bellowed, his voice ragged and raw. What have you done?" A sharp, mirthless laugh sliced through the din. "I merely seized what was rightfully mine. The pack deserves a leader of strength, not one blinded by sentiment." A flicker of jealousy tightened her lips as she glanced at Ilara. The pack descended into a maelstrom of claws and fangs. Comrades became adversaries. Brethren turned on brethren. The coppery tang of blood mingled with the rain, creating a nauseating aroma. Weakened and disoriented, Ronan fought with savage abandon. He was alpha, and he would not yield easily. He lunged at Lyra, disarming her with a swift blow. She stumbled back, her eyes wide with shock, as he pinned her against a tree, his claws pricking her flesh. "You dare betray me?" he growled, his voice a guttural rumble. "You gave me no choice," she spat, defiance blazing in her eyes. "You were prepared to destroy everything for a human trinket." Before he could react, a crushing blow from behind sent him sprawling. A towering wolf, one of Lyra's fiercest champions, loomed over him, fangs bared. Ronan staggered, the wound in his side screaming in protest. He collapsed to his knees, the ground beneath him slick with his lifeblood. Ilara's scream cut through the cacophony, a primal cry that resonated within Ronan. He watched her break free, shoving her way towards him. Right behind, Cale moved, a force of nature mowing down Lyra's ranks. Seeing her calculated coup dissolving, Lyra snarled an order. "Kill him! Kill them both!" The battle intensified, a desperate dance of survival. Loyal pack members formed a protective ring around their fallen alpha, facing Lyra's relentless assault. A palpable tension filled the air, a stark premonition that the night would irrevocably alter their existence. Cale reached Ronan first, flinging aside a snarling wolf, and sinking to his knees beside him. "Ronan!" he yelled, his voice a strange cocktail of concern and eagerness. "Hang on!" Ilara knelt beside Ronan, her hands hovering uselessly above the wound, her features etched with anguish. "Ronan, Please, she murmured, her voice trembling. You have to fight. Please. Ronan gazed at her, his eyes swimming with an agony that transcended the physical. He saw her worry, her genuine fear, and a hint of regret. He couldn't decipher it, his vision blurred, the faces around him dissolving into indistinct shapes. He attempted to speak, to convey something, anything, but the words caught in his throat. The encroaching darkness pulled him under. He could hear Lyra's exultant laughter, the clamor of battle, Ilara's desperate pleas, but they faded into distant echoes within the storm. The last thing he registered before oblivion was Ilara's face, her eyes reflecting utter despair. And then nothing. Lyra observed Ronan's collapse, a victorious smirk claiming her lips. The pack's allegiances were visibly wavering. With their alpha seemingly vanquished, they would rally behind her. She assessed Ilara and Kale kneeling beside Ronan, their faces studies in grief. They posed a challenge, but one she would soon address. Enough, Lyra commanded, her voice reverberating through the clearing. The Alpha is dead. I am your new leader. Those who support me, step forward. A pregnant silence descended. Slowly, hesitantly, some pack members began to shift, their eyes clouded with uncertainty. Others remained rooted, loyalty etched on their faces, claws extended. The pack was fractured, its future hanging precariously in the balance. Rising to her feet, Ilara's gaze bored into Lyra, her expression a mask of contempt. You won't prevail, she hissed. Ronan may be down, but he's not defeated. And even if he were, I will exact retribution for this treachery. Lyra emitted a mocking, cruel laugh. You? What could you possibly do? You are merely a human, a plaything. You possess no power here. A dangerous smile touched Ilara's lips. You underestimate me, she said softly. I am merely human, but no longer helpless. Now I have nothing left to lose. She turned to Kale, their eyes locking. We must get Ronan out of here, she stated. Now. Kale nodded, his face resolute. He gathered Ronan into his arms, his powerful muscles straining. He glared at Lyra, a silent promise of vengeance blazing in his gaze. This is far from over, he growled. They vanished into the tempestuous night, abandoning Lyra to her newly formed dominion, the air thick with the stench of blood and betrayal. The night of treachery had just begun, and the Crescent Moon Pack would never know peace again. United against the darkness, the air reeked of iron and evergreens, a cloying miasma that hung heavy. Crimson smeared her hands as Ilara staunchly patted the wound tearing through Ronan's flank. His breaths came in short, whistling bursts, failing to break the profound stillness. We have to move, she breathed, her voice thin. Lyra won't delay solidifying her regime. She'll unleash the hounds. Ronan, slumped against the rough bark of an oak, winced. I can't even rise. Kale, knuckles raw and glistening with old blood, stepped up. Then he won't walk. He's mine to carry. With surprising ease, he lifted Ronan, his muscles corded with the strain of the Alpha's weight. The fierce animosity that once blazed between them seemed banked, now fueled by a mutual, pressing goal. Ilara saw it in the set of Kale's jaw, the unwavering concentration in his eyes. We can't retreat towards our lands, Ilara declared, her mind already a whirlwind of strategy. Lyra anticipates that. East, towards the forgotten territories. Caves lie there. Secret ways known only to a few. Hesitation flickered across her face as she glanced at Ronan. I know that land intimately. I know the chinks in the pack's armor. Ronan, agony clouding his vision, managed a feeble nod. Trust her, he croaked. She knows. And so they pressed on, an unlikely and fractured fellowship forged in the crucible of betrayal and desperation. Ilara spearheaded their escape, her senses heightened, sifting through the shadows for any sign of pursuit. Kale, his strength unwavering, bore Ronan through the tangled underbrush, his exhaled breath clouding the frigid air. The forest, once a source of solace, now felt like a lurking predator. Each rustle of foliage a potential alarm. Approaching the eastern boundary, Ilara halted, raising a warning hand. The patrols usually thing here, she murmured, her voice hushed. They depend on natural defenses, cliffs, chasms. But there's a route, a slender passage I unearthed years ago. She guided them toward a stark rock face, her fingertips tracing the outline of a concealed fissure. This is it, she announced, leaning her shoulder against the stone. With a grunt, she shifted a portion of the rock, revealing a tight aperture. It's a squeeze, but we can make it. Kale entered first, carefully maneuvering Ronan through the confining space. Ilara followed, resetting the stone panel, obscuring any trace of their passage. The tunnel opened onto a small, secluded valley, veiled in mist and silence. A latticework of caves pocked the valley walls, offering ready shelter. We're safe here, for now, Ilara stated, her gaze sweeping the valley. But sanctuary is temporary. Lyra will eventually sniff us out. Ronan, now resting on a bed of moss within one of the caves, strained to sit. She underestimated you, Ilara, he rasped, his voice feeble yet laced with reluctant respect. She saw you as a prize to be claimed. But you're more than that. You're resourceful. Ilara knelt, her expression softening. I learned to adapt, she said quietly. I had to. Kale, a silent observer until now, advanced. The plan? He inquired, his tone devoid of its former animosity. We can't simply await Lyra's arrival. We retaliate, Ilara declared, her voice hardening. We fight for our survival. We fight to reclaim what Lyra has stolen. She looked at Ronan, her eyes blazing with resolve. But we require strategy. Lyra is versed in our strengths. We need to exploit her vulnerabilities. Despite his pain, Ronan summoned a shadow of a smile. Then command us, he said. You know the pack better than I do now. And so, under the cover of night, they began to devise their counterstrike. Ilara, leveraging her deep understanding of the Crescent Moon pack, laid out Lyra's probable maneuvers, pinpointing the gaps in her defenses. She recognized that Lyra's strength lay in her cold-bloodedness, her willingness to sacrifice anything for her ambitions. Yet, she also recognized that Lyra's ambition had fostered, end quote, arrogance and blind spots. Lyra expects us to cower, to flee, Ilara said, pacing the cave floor. She'll dedicate her efforts to securing the territory, consolidating power. She won't anticipate a swift retaliation. Then we weaponize that assumption, Kale replied, his eyes gleaming with a hunter's intensity. We strike her where she is weakest, where she feels most secure. They spent hours scrutinizing maps of the territory, identifying key strategic locations, patrol patterns, and potential flaws. Ilara detailed the pack's communication grid, the intricate system of scent markings and howls used to transmit messages. Though security would have tightened, there were still ways to skirt the new protocols. As dawn neared, they cemented their strategy. It was perilous, audacious, bordering on suicidal, but it was their only shot. We divide, Elara said, her gaze locking with Kale's. Kale, you create a diversion, drawing Lyra's forces away from the Central Territory. I'll accompany Ronan and infiltrate the pack house. We must unearth proof of Lyra's betrayal, evidence to turn the pack against her. Kale nodded, his expression resolute. It's madness, he said. Entering the pack house is like walking into the jaws of a beast. I know, Elara replied, her voice unwavering. But it is the only path. We must expose Lyra's true nature, a traitor who murdered her alpha and seized control through deceit. His strength returning, Ronan pushed himself upright. I'm with you, he stated, his voice firm. This is my pack. I won't allow Lyra to shatter it. You are still wounded, Elara protested. You require rest. I'll rest when Lyra is silenced, Ronan vowed, his eyes burning with a glacial fury. Until then, I'll fight at your side. And so they prepared for war. Elara honed her knives, her movements efficient and precise. Kale inventoried his arsenal, his expression focused and determined. Leaning heavily on a makeshift crutch, Ronan practiced his stance, his jaw tight with pain. As the sun crested the horizon, bathing the world in hues of dawn, they emerged from the hidden valley, ready to confront the encroaching darkness. Elara inhaled deeply, the scent of pine and moist earth filling her lungs. The odds were overwhelmingly stacked against them, their prospects of survival slim. Yet, they possessed what Lyra lacked: loyalty, courage, and an unyielding resolve to fight for justice. They stood united against the encroaching night, and they would not surrender without a ferocious struggle. The Alpha's choice. The air reeked of blood and carried the sharp, clean scent of evergreens. Trapped beneath a heavy timber, Lyra coughed crimson onto the disturbed soil. Her eyes, normally shrewd and calculating, now blazed with unrestrained fury. Loyalists of Ronan, reinforced by the unexpected arrival of the Silverstream pack, formed a protective ring, weapons poised. It appears your reach exceeded your grasp. Lyra, Ronan observed, his tone laced with a weariness that belied the recent triumph. A raw gash defaced his cheek, a souvenir from their brief, savage skirmish. Lyra's retort was a rasping laugh that cut through the stillness of the valley. Ambition is a virtue, Ronan, one you seem to have traded for infatuation. Her gaze darted towards Elara, who stood mean. Nearby, Kale is silent, vigilant guardian at her side. You were ensnared by a scent, Alpha, a pretty little distraction. Ronan's jaw hardened. You engineered an assault on your own people, Lyra. You risked innocent lives. Innocence is a luxury we cannot indulge, she spat. This pack requires strength, resolve. You were becoming soft, complacent. And you saw treachery as the solution? Ronan's voice was a low growl. I saw it as unavoidable, Lyra snapped back. A fleeting, almost amused expression then flickered across her face. But perhaps I underestimated the resilience of your chosen one. Or perhaps I overestimated your own ability to keep her. Her eyes flickered to Elara again, a calculating light within their depths. Savor this victory, Ronan. It will be fleeting. With a sudden burst of strength, Lyra heaved the beam aside, disregarding the grunt of pain it provoked. Before anyone could react, she shifted, a dark wraith melting into the twilight. The forest absorbed her, leaving behind only the lingering, acrid odor of bitter almonds and a silent promise of vengeance. Ronan tracked her departure, His face a mask, he addressed his warriors. "Secure the perimeter. She won't travel far." Yet, even as he issued the command, he knew Lyra had already vanished. She was too wily, too resourceful. She would fade away, regroup, and return, a specter haunting their newfound peace. The order delivered, Ronan finally turned his attention to Ilara. The conflict had aged her in mere hours. Streaks of grime marred her face, splatters of dried blood stained her broad tunic, but her eyes, they burned with an unyielding inner fire. He perceived no terror, only a steadfast resolve. He approached deliberately, his steps measured. Cale stiffened, his eyes narrowing, a mute warning. Ronan halted a few feet away, respecting the unseen boundary Cale had established. "You were pivotal to our victory, Ilara," he conceded, the words awkward on his tongue. "You anticipated Lyra's strategies, her weaknesses." Ilara's gaze met his, unwavering. "I know this pack, Ronan. I recognize its strengths and its deficiencies, and you chose to aid us." "I chose to shield those who could not defend themselves," she corrected, her voice gentle yet firm. "And to stop Lyra from hurting more innocents." Ronan gave a slow nod. He had witnessed her movements during the fray, her actions precise and effective, her empathy clear as she tended to the injured. He had seen the fortitude she possessed, a fortitude that rivaled Rive, even his own. "You are more courageous than I realized," Ronan admitted quietly, "and more kind." He glanced from her to Cale, then back again. He had seen them fighting as one, a perfect display of coordination and loyalty. He had observed the way Cale watched over her, a possessiveness that mirrored his own but with a deeper affection than he knew. He sensed the invisible thread that bound them, a connection forged in shared ordeal and unwavering devotion. "The connection between you two is undeniable," Ronan murmured, more to himself than aloud. Ilara remained silent, her hand instinctively seeking Cale's. Their fingers twined together, a wordless confirmation of their bond. Ronan watched them, a strange cocktail of emotions swirling within him. Jealousy, certainly, but also a grudging respect, and, perhaps, a glimmer of understanding. He had always subscribed to the idea of true mates, the irresistible force of destiny. But what if destiny wasn't about ownership, but about selection? What if genuine power lay not in imposing a bond, but in appreciating the power of another's? He recalled Lyra's words, her accusation that he was growing weak. He had been blinded, yes, but not by desire. He had been blinded by his own arrogance, by his conviction that he was entitled to whatever he coveted. He had mistaken dominance for love, control for strength. Ronan drew a long breath, the crisp night air filling his lungs. He had a pack to restore, a renegade to pursue, and a realm to protect. But before he could embark on any of that, he had to make a judgment that would dictate not only his future, but the fate of everyone around him. He looked at Ilara, her face etched with fatigue, but her eyes still radiating an inner luminescence. He looked at Cale, his protective posture unwavering, his devotion to Ilara evident in every fiber of his being. "Ilara," Ronan said, his voice steady and clear. "I believed I was mistaken." He paused, searching for the appropriate words. "I arrived here convinced that you were destined to be mine. But I see now that destiny is not a prison. It's a path, and you have the right to forge your own." He turned to Cale. "Safeguard her, Cale. Safeguard her with all that you possess." Cale nodded, his hand clasping Ilara's tighter. It was a silent oath. a promise he would defend with his very existence. Ronan turned and walked away, leaving Ilara and Kale standing alone in the clearing. The magnitude of his words lingered in the air, heavy and profound. The Alpha had rendered his verdict. Now, it was up to them to determine what lay ahead. The escape had been a success, but the conflict was far from concluded. Freedom's embrace unspoken grievances permeated the Alpha's study, mingling with the sharp scent of evergreens and the lingering odor of regret. Ronan, a picture of dejection by the expansive window overlooking the training grounds, seemed a warrior vanquished less by combat than by inner turmoil. Ilara observed him, her heart a discordant blend of relief and an odd, aching echo of their severed bond. Beside her, Kale offered a silent reassurance of protection, his hand hovering near hers. Finally, Ronan pivoted, his gaze locking with Ilara's. The fiery possessiveness that had once blazed in his eyes was now banked, replaced by a weary acceptance, perhaps even a grudging respect. "Ilara," he began, his voice a low rasp. "I erred. I was blinded by what I mistook for fate." A tick pulsed in his jaw. This pack demands a strong leader, not one consumed by obsession. He moved toward her, but checked himself. "I hereby relinquish any claim upon you, Ilara Meadowsweet. Your future is yours to define." The formal declaration seemed to extract a price, each word severing the invisible threads that had tethered her to him, the powerful pull fading into insignificance. A lightness bloomed within Ilara, an absence of the oppressive weight she hadn't fully realized she'd carried. Kale's hand finally enveloped hers, grounding her like a solid anchor in a turbulent sea. His gentle squeeze posed a silent question. Meeting his gaze, she saw not just affection, but unwavering fealty, fierce guardianship, and a profound understanding that surpassed spoken language. He didn't demand her choice, he simply offered it. "I choose Kale," she stated, her voice ringing with conviction. The pronouncement resonated in the room, a testament to her heart, a rejection of preordained destiny. A surge of warmth coursed through her, solidifying their connection, forged not by ancient enchantment, but by shared trials, mutual esteem, and a love kindled in the face of adversity. Ronan gave a curt nod, his features inscrutable. Turning his attention to Kale, his expression hardened. "Protect her, Kale Shadowclaw. Her worth exceeds your comprehension. To me, to the pack, it was an order, not a plea." And Kale met his intensity without faltering. "With my life, Alpha," Kale responded, his tone even and resolute. He would show Ronan respect, but his allegiance belonged first and foremost to Ilara. Ronan held his gaze for a prolonged moment, then dismissed them with a flick of his wrist. As they turned to depart, a sudden wave of compassion washed over Ilara. She glimpsed the solitude in Ronan's eyes, the heavy mantle of leadership he bore, the self-sacrifice he had just enacted. "Ronan," she said softly. He turned back, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. "Thank you for doing what was right, even when it was painful." He offered a clipped nod, his gaze already drifting back to the window, to the pack he was sworn to safeguard. Ilara surmised a subtle easing of tension in his frame. He, too, was released, liberated from the distraction of a bond that threatened to engulf him. Hand in hand, Ilara and Kale exited the Alpha's study, leaving the main house behind and stepping out into the cool embrace of the night air. The moon, a silver disk in the inky sky, cast elongated shadows across the training grounds. Their footfalls crunched on the gravel path as they walked in companionable silence, their destination unarticulated but implicitly understood. Reaching the edge of pack territory, Ilara paused, glancing back at the sprawling cluster of buildings nestled in the valley below. It had been a place of constraint, of trepidation, but also of unforeseen camaraderie and hard-fought triumphs. She inhaled deeply, drawing the crisp night air into her lungs, and then turned her back on it all. "Ready?" Cale inquired, his voice a gentle caress against her ear. Ilara nodded, a thrill of anticipation rippling through her. She was abandoning the strictures of pack life, the expectations, the machinations, the peril. She was embracing freedom, choosing love, opting for a life lived according to her own design. They stepped across the imperceptible boundary line, relinquishing the Crescent Moon Pack's domain. Entering the dense wood, the familiar fragrance of pine and damp earth enveloped her. It was a raw, untamed landscape, brimming with clandestine dangers, yet overflowing with boundless opportunities. Cale led the way, his senses heightened, his movements as silent and fluid as the shadows themselves. He was a creature of the wild, at ease in the darkness, a protector by instinct and training. Ilara followed close behind, her heart swelling with a tranquility she hadn't thought attainable. They journeyed for hours, guided only by the moon's ethereal glow, their sole companions the sounds of the forest. As dawn approached, they discovered a secluded clearing nestled beside a babbling brook. Cale kindled a small fire, the flames snapping and popping, casting flickering silhouettes onto the surrounding trees. Ilara settled beside him, mesmerized by the dancing flames. She felt weary, yet invigorated, unfettered by the pack's constraints, liberated to explore the world with the man she loved. Leaning her head against his shoulder, she felt his arm encircle her, drawing her close. "Where will we go?" she murmured. Cale shrugged, a smile in his voice. "Wherever fate dictates. Somewhere the specters of the past cannot haunt us. Somewhere we can cultivate a life together, just you and I." Ilara smiled, her heart brimming with affection. She required no pack, no title, no preordained destiny. She had Cale, and that was all that mattered. She possessed freedom, a gift more priceless than any alpha's claim. Tilting her head, she kissed him, a kiss imbued with gratitude, with fervor, with a pledge of a shared future. A future they would forge together, one step at a time. They were home, embraced by freedom's warm aura. A legend whispered beyond Ronan's borders. The air possessed a different quality, not necessarily pristine, but unburdened. Gone was the stifling weight of pack hierarchy, the unspoken obligations, the persistent awareness of Ronan's scrutiny. Ilara inhaled deeply, savoring the earthy tang of pine and moist soil. A wave of revitalization washed over her. Cale walked close, his fingers occasionally grazing Hirsa's silent vow of support. For days they journeyed without a map, led by an inner compass, seeking a sanctuary of their own making. "Are you certain about this, Ilara?" Cale murmured one evening, the flickering firelight dancing in his obsidian eyes. He had posed the question in numerous ways since their departure, each intonation tinged with a slightly different nuance of apprehension. Not doubt of her affection, she knew, but rather anxiety about the uncharted future stretching before them. Ilara responded by intertwining her fingers with his. "More certain than I've ever been of anything, Cale. This is my choice. You are my choice." He returned the pressure, a fleeting smile gracing his lips. "Even without a pack? Without guaranteed safety?" "Safety can be a gilded cage," she countered, her gaze drifting across the moon-drenched woods. "I'd rather face the wilderness's perils with you than endure a sheltered existence not of my choosing. Eventually, they discovered it. A secluded valley cradled between two imposing peaks. A secret refuge untouched by the world's clamor. A stream, clear as liquid crystal, meandered through the valley floor, nourishing a vibrant meadow sprinkled with wildflowers. Imposing pines and ancient oaks acted as a natural bulwark, sheltering the valley from harsh gales and unwanted observation. Ilara halted at the meadow's edge, a gasp escaping her lips. "It's everything," she breathed, her voice laced with wonder. Kale, standing sentinel beside her, mirrored her expression. He perceived not merely the valley's allure, but the promise of a home. A life sculpted by their own hands. So, they began building. Trees were felled with careful deliberation, respecting the forest's delicate equilibrium. Stones were hauled from the stream, their muscles protesting with each lift. They labored in unison, their movements synchronized, a silent ballet of cooperation and devotion. "This is more demanding than tangling with a rogue pack," Ilara joked one afternoon, wrestling with an exceptionally heavy stone. Kale chuckled, effortlessly hoisting the stone onto his shoulder. "But rather more gratifying, wouldn't you agree?" She grinned, wiping perspiration from her forehead. "Immensely more so." Their dwelling was modest, a robust cabin fashioned from logs and stone, yet permeated with warmth and affection. A generous hearth dominated one wall, promising respite from winter's chill. A vast window framed the meadow, offering a panoramic vista of the valley's splendor. They furnished it with handmade pieces, each a testament to their collaborative efforts. One evening, as they sat cloaked in the fire's embrace, Ilara caught Kale observing her, his expression inscrutable. "What is it?" she inquired, a sudden disquiet fluttering in her chest. He paused, then spoke, his voice subdued and tentative. "I've never navigated this terrain before. Constructed a home, shared my existence. I dread failing you, Ilara." She reached out, cradling his face. "You won't. You couldn't. We'll navigate it together, Kale, as we always have." He leaned into her touch, his eyes closing briefly. "I love you, Ilara Meadowsweet." Words failed to capture the depth. "And I love you, Kale Shadowclaw," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "More than I ever deemed possible." Their love's whisper began to drift, carried on the wind, heralded by the birds, shared among the forest's denizens. The deer grazing in the meadow, the wolves serenading the moon, the owls murmuring ancient secrets all new of Ilara and Kale. The outcast and the she-wolf who had forged love and liberty in the wilderness. A young rabbit, bolder than usual, eavesdropped on the rustling leaves. "They made their choice, did you know?" The leaves murmured, their voices like brittle parchment. The moon's pull was persuasive, yet their hearts were stronger. An ancient owl, perched on a bough, hooted its wisdom. "A true bond can be formidable, yet it cannot compel what is not true." Ilara's heart belonged to Kale, and that sufficed. Even the wind seemed to echo their tale, swirling through the valley, rustling foliage, and whispering their names. Ilara Kale, Ilara Kale. One day, while exploring the woods, Ilara and Kale stumbled upon a wolf cub, separated and distraught. Ilara, her heart going out to the creature, gently coaxed it near, offering dried meat. Hesitant at first, the cub surrendered to her gentle touch, nuzzling her hand. "We should return him to his pack," Kale said, concern in his tone. Ilara shook her head. "I don't believe we can," He carries the scent of Ronin's territory. They deem him a spy. Kale frowned. So, we abandon him? Ilara's gaze locked with the cubs, her eyes resolute. No, we raise him. And so, they did. They named him Shadow, honoring Kale's history and symbolizing their new beginning. They imparted the skills of survival, the art of the hunt, the values of a good wolf. Shadow swiftly integrated into their family, filling the cabin with laughter. One evening, watching Shadow frolic near the fire, Ilara realized they had forged something extraordinary, transcending pack allegiances and preordained destinies. They had created a haven, a family, built on love, trust, and unyielding freedom. Their tale, the ballad of Ilara and Kale, the outcast, and the she-wolf who defied fate for love, security for autonomy, would continue to resonate through the trees, an immortal anthem of courage, fortitude, and love's enduring resilience. Laughter painted on the wind, mingling with the rustling leaves and the owl's soft calls, a symphony of love and freedom reverberating through the ancient woods. Their sanctuary became a beacon, attesting to the possibility of carving one's own destiny, embracing love in the most improbable corners. The legend of Ilara and Kale was more than just a story. It was a whispered promise that even during the darkest chapters, love and liberty could triumph.